Okay, so it is week number 3, and this is a special week that I'm doing this lecture. And the reason why the lecture is being done this week is because I had to cancel last week. I sent an email to each of you telling you that our aunt, and actually I was at her house when I sent it, was probably not going to be living much longer, and she passed that same evening, about 9:10 that evening. So been pretty tough on us. So we're preparing for service this week. I will be getting your week 1 assignments completed in the next day or so. I'm a little bit behind, being knocked for a loop there, but I will have them completed before the end of this week. And then, of course, week 2s are not due until the end of the week or the beginning of next week, and so I'll be starting to work on those as well. So if you can hear me well, just type yes in the box. Just type yes in the box. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started right away here. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and again, I just want to remind everybody that your written assignment, you have to conduct research, and also the textbook can't be the sole source. I've had a few students already in some of the grades that I've done for week 1 to not have conducted research, but they use corrections as the only source for their papers. You lose points right away for that. And then also, all written assignments should be in APA format, citations in the body throughout the paper, not just one citation, and references at the end. This is a 2-page requirement for week 1. And then so you see what happens is that you lose 5 points rather right off the bat for APA. So you could, assuming all the other criteria. So you want to make sure that all of these are satisfied because there's the rubrics right there. All right. Now this only applies to written assignments. Like for week 2, there's a separate rubric that you have down at the bottom, and it tells you the rubric for the course project, and this one is for week 2 that you had. You won't have one this week, but in next week we will be doing a lecture. We'll be back on track, and I'll be discussing that assignment next week. So today, I just want to get right into the announcement. Third week, probation and intermediate sanctions, section 5 of the textbook. And then restorative justice, key issues in crime and punishment courts, law and justice. And then complete the activity, probation facts, intermediate sanctions chart, diversion, and also a conversation with a CCA director. I'm probably not going to record that because they usually don't come out very well when I record them. So I'm going to refer to that when we come to that to make sure you watch that. But then your discussion post, intermediate sanctions, initial posts were due yesterday by 11:59 p.m. And then, of course, your reply post this Saturday by 11:59 p.m. Remember, guys, if you're on a different time zone, Central Standard Time for all times. Finally, the written assignment, restorative justice, and the quiz. And make sure that when you do restorative justice, that you not only look at the module, but you also look at the um, written assignment for week 3. What's restorative justice, and it explains how you can get 10 points and then 10 points, then how you can lose 5 points. Very, 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 very important. Okay. And then, of course, your quiz. Again, I have recommended to students that you do your quiz at the end of the week, which would be Sunday. Some people have started to do them already. Until you've gone through all the material and studied, it's not so good. And then, so we're going to continue to be strong, and we're going to finish strong. And then I've already talked about my motto: adversity is the springboard to success. Let's take a look at the course calendar. Course calendar. And this is where we are now. We're at, let's see, let me get this out of there. I want to get that blue one out of there. That's J150. So now you just see yours. Okay, there we go. Calendars will intermingle. So anyway, so your assignment coming up for this week is your reading assignment. I already told you what that was, but just again, there's also something else in there for you to read in addition to your textbook section 5. And then your initial post due yesterday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Your reply post due Saturday. Then your written assignment, and then of course your quiz. And then we'll get to next week when we do the lecture, because we'll be back on track next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time with our lecture. Okay? So now let's take a look at Module 3. So let's look again at the assignments real quick. It's a 1 to 2 page paper. So make sure that you, and most students have been doing pretty good with Grammarly. I haven't looked at all the ones in this course, but when there's a 1 page paper, make sure that you have some critical thinking involved in it a lot. And you're going to answer these 3 questions, and you're going to address them with correct spelling, grammar, APA format. And I've already talked about APA and what it requires. Make sure you have a cover sheet as well. And then that's, of course, we know that's due this Sunday. And then your discussion, you've been working on that already, and you guys have been doing really good with that. And then your quiz, that'll be due this Sunday. Make sure that you perform well on that. Now, let's go back to week 2 for a minute. Those assignments should have been in by now, but let's just take a look at it. Of course, though, determinate or indeterminate sentencing, I haven't gotten to grade those, but this is a 2 page paper dealing with these 2 things. And then, again, APA, you have your rubric on the home page, and I sent it to you as well. Then you have your discussion post that were due last Tuesday, and then your reply post due last Saturday. Now, in this first course project, in a paragraph or 2, describe the agency. Now, a few students, even at this stage, have asked me what agencies, and I refer back to the open house, which I took very, very, very great detail in breaking down the phases of the project and telling you that it is important that you use your rubric to make sure that you satisfy the requirements. students still ask me about an agency. And there are only 4 agencies that you can write about: jail, prison, parole, or probation. No others. Some students have asked me, can I do it where I work? If you work in one of those 4, absolutely. That's a great thing. That means your paper really should be absolutely awesome and top notch. I have no problem. I'm not going to make somebody go someplace else and do that. And then we've already discussed the methods for the interview. It could even by phone. I've already given permission for that. Once again, I refer students back to the open house. And I don't try to be rude, but when a student asks me and they said, I've got the archive, but I haven't had a chance to look at it, I take issue with that because I took a lot of time to put that together, to provide step by step by step. And the least that I would expect is for students to go and listen to the archive. Because if it was me personally, and I was the top student, because I not only did what I was supposed to do, but I went beyond that. And I worked. We already talked about that before. So there are students, oh, you don't understand, I have responsibilities. All the way through school, I had responsibilities. So that's not going to be an issue. You just have to manage your time, and you've got to do it. But it tells you what steps you were supposed to take in terms of doing that. Now, that was supposed to be completed last week. Again, like I said, so I'm going to go back to week module 3. So now I'm going to go to the lesson content. Okay, and we deal with the assignments here, and this is where you find that reading that I was talking about earlier, the restorative justice, key issues in crime and punishment law, and where you can go in and find that full article and read it. And then there's a section on probation facts, intermediate sanctions chart, diversion, and then the conversation. I already told you about the written assignments, the discussion, and the quiz. So let's look on, let's go on down here to some facts about probation. Now, people should understand the reason for probation. What is probation? Basically, probation is when an individual is sentenced after being found guilty or pled guilty, and they are given an opportunity to serve their time without going to jail or prison. And it requires that that individual satisfy the requirements of the probation order that's issued. For example, I have referred a couple of times in the past, and I'll mention it now, that I participated and worked with probation officers in a courtroom, or actually a probation officer, and individuals who came before a judge that I was in front of, named Judge Eugene Pincham in Cook County, said that he noticed that if a student didn't have their GED or high school diploma, and they were not a violent offender, that he would impose the possibility of completing to get their GED through the program called Probation Challenge. And that if they completed the program successfully, they come back before the judge and they would be released. So what I'm saying is that this is one of the things that can be done. This little blurb here says sometimes people think that offenders who are sentenced to probation receive a slap on the wrist, but instead it is a requirement that the student use an alternative method and is supervised by the probation officer, has to report to the probation officer, has to stay out of trouble, has to refrain from alcohol and drugs. And so the conditions that the court sets out are the requirements that must be met in order for the person to remain on probation. It says that a jail sanction may be included as a condition of probation. And the remaining conditions include many things from treatment. If a person needs treatment, then they're going to have to subject themselves or submit themselves to the treatment program, or education programs like the one I talked about. Maybe doing some community service, working in the community to allow them to become sensitive to the crimes, maybe cleaning up or something. I've seen in hate crime cases where individuals have taken community service, for example, where the victim was an African American or either a Jewish person. They've been forced to work in communities where these people live, or in organizations associated with them, such as Operation Push, or maybe working in the NAACP, or some organization that's related to a Jewish community. And then also there's sometimes some requirement that they have a condition if they're working to pay financial restitution. Now usually those kinds of financial restitution is usually attached to an individual who has an opportunity to be able to continue to make a living. It would be unconscionable for where a person could not get a job to put them in financial restitution. And so again, as I said, refraining from drugs, alcohol, and individuals are subject to what they call random testing, or drops, as we say. So each offender has a different thing that can happen to them. And it talks about the fact that it can be used for minor offenses. And some offenders may be required to be in touch with their probation officer several times a week. Some may have to report only a quarter period of time. It depends. And officers keep up with where the person is living and will make random visits to the probationers. The bottom line is to make sure that the offender is carrying out the requirements. So that's usually operated by what we call POs, or probation officers, and they talk about the task to supervise, investigate, and surveil. And you know, probation officers don't sit behind a desk generally. They're actually out, and they're there to help the clients, and they work in conjunction with carrying out the court-ordered conditions of probation to make sure that they are being satisfied. So it says probation officers enforce the court orders by supervising and monitoring the client's behavior and compliance. The they conduct pre-sentence investigations, which means there's a report that's prepared for the court to provide background and sentencing recommendations. That's usually before sentencing, so that they can reach a determination, determine the history of that individual as relates to crime or lack of committing crimes thereof. And so probation officers are on all levels, and the CCA, or the Corrections, or the Community Corrections Act, allows states to fund probation officers and programs throughout the various jurisdictions. And so the key thing is that the probation officer, with their reports and testimony in court, seeing clients in the office and in the community or anywhere else, home, they document the daily activities and so forth. So it's a good position. Some of you desire to work that, and it's very beneficial. My understanding is that probation officers must have a bachelor's degree in order to operate in the field. My understanding is that most jurisdictions require a bachelor's degree to work in those fields, because basically you're going to be a little bit of investigator, social worker, and so you're going to be involved with all those different kind of things. So now, if a person violates their probation, the probation officer has the responsibility of filing a motion in the court called a VOP, that's what we call it, which is violation of probation. And that is where the probation officer will file this and bring it before the court. And the probation officer merely has to prove by what we call preponderance of evidence that the individual violated their probation. So it's an easier standard than the actual standard in a criminal case, which is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So there are usually situations where individuals have to make sure that they walk the line. Now, the goal in most of these instances, depending on the severity of the violation, is not to send that person back, but to sometimes give them a chance, depending on what the offense is. But then, of course, repeat offenders, you're writing your own ticket to finish the rest of your time behind bars. So these are some facts about how probation operates. Okay. Any questions about this? You can type in if you have any questions. I'll see it. Any questions? Okay. So the point of the matter is that any questions about any of the assignments that I've talked about, either the thing I talked about from week 2 or either for this week? Any questions? Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, so we're going to move right along, and we're going to look at intermediate sanctions. Now, intermediate sanctions is just what it says. It's a sanction that the court can issue other than locking a person up. And these are all usually conditions that are tied to probation. These are ways that they can operate in doing something short of incarcerating that individual. And so these are a few of them. And if you put your mouse over it, you begin to see. Now, like boot camp, often used for younger offenders, can be utilized for adults. Military-style regime to instill discipline may also include educational component. Now, the thing about boot camps that I really like is that it actually puts individuals in a position, like in the military, where they are forced to comply with authority or respect authority or to help those. And I've seen many young people who have had to go to boot camp, and given the opportunity, they will take it because of the fact that it redirects them. And I've seen boot camp save the lives of some people there. Then there's residential centers or halfway houses, where people have work release orders. They're able to go do what they have to do, go to work, go to school, and they can be secure or non-secure. The point of the matter is that, again, you could see the idea here is to give the individual something to help them to go in a new direction rather than continue as a life of crime. This one right here, shock probation or split sentencing, is more severe and allows the offender to be released into the community on what we call supervised probation after they've experienced the shock of incarceration. In other words, they've been locked up for a while so they can understand what it really feels like to have your freedom taken away. And then those individuals are given an opportunity to see if they understood or got the message. So then they'll allow those individuals to go back and operate in the community. But again, the problem that takes place there is if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you can and will be spend the rest of your time behind jail. And, you know, I've seen that operate, but, you know, you got to remember all of these sanctions are going to be dependent on the ability of the individual to be strong enough to accept the fact that they did something wrong and to learn from their mistakes and not to make the same mistake or mistakes similar to that again. Day reporting, clients report on a daily basis where they will have to go every single day or either go to the jail. Can be offering services to help individuals to get jobs, for employment, housing, and other life skills. Again, I've seen educational things there. I strongly encourage education. I have been a person who has been a supporter of education over incarceration because I've seen individuals, such as in that program I was telling you about a little earlier, where they are less likely to be recidivists when they obtain an education. It also helps to build some self-worth in those individuals, self-respect, and appreciation for taking care of their families, their lives, themselves, and not to go out and commit offenses that result in being incarcerated. Of course, drug courts, this is these courts are for individuals who are nonviolent, who actually generally are what we might call addicts. And these courts usually will allow individuals to absolutely go through a program. I was just talking to one of my former students who is a longtime correction officer in the Illinois Department of Corrections, and she is now pretty high up. She's a major, which is as far as she can go as an officer, and she's got, oh God, nearly over 20-something years of experience. She's now in charge of a new program in Will County that if anyone's interested in getting some information, she said that she'd be willing to work with whoever. Just let me know, and I'll put you in touch with them, and maybe there's something you can do with her. But anyway, the point of the matter is that the drug courts issue orders that are conditioned upon you attempting to get the help, because it is no secret, if you've been in the criminal justice system and operate as a lawyer, police officer, prosecutor, the whole 9 yards, investigator, is that oftentimes individuals end up in the system because of the fact that they commit crimes to support their habits, and that they are, so I say, placed in bondage themselves because the fact that they are not free to make decisions because they have what they call a monkey on their back, which means that the drug controls their actions, and they'll do anything, including killing their own mom or close family member, to get that habit. And it interferes with the cognitive or the mental state of that individual to be able to make good judgments. So drug courts specialize in helping those kinds of individuals. Now, most drug courts that I know don't deal with dealers. When you have large quantities, That's not the purpose. The primary purpose of most of the drug courts that I've seen and I have represented people in have been individuals who were users of drugs and found themselves in situations where they were out of control. Then there's house arrest or electric monitoring. You know about that, where there's electronic bracelet or anklet that's a GPS, and it keeps up with every place that you go. And you can't take that thing off. If you try to deactivate it, it'll send a signal to the probation officer's agency. Usually they have a particular agency, of which I'm familiar with, that's what they do. They monitor those things, and that when there's a problem, they report it, and then the probation officer will investigate. But so if a person tries to tamper with, of course, they're not going to try to go somewhere else where they can find themselves in trouble. Don't think that it's like this movie, one of Tyler Perry movies. I think it's Family Reunion. I think it was anyway, where Medea had to wear an ankle bracelet, and she got butter or something, got it off, and then put it on a dog, and and she went. It doesn't work like that, guys. It's more sophisticated than that. Even if you don't get it off, when you start to tamper with it, it creates a problem. The bottom line is that you don't want to do house arrest. You want to violate that, then you'll do arrest in the rest of your time in jail. And again, back to the point that I repeated earlier, it's where you're given an opportunity to try to go in a new direction. Everybody has to make a choice. And we don't want to throw it out because there are people that still want to do it. Then community service work, where they work within the community. I've kind of talked about that a little earlier, so I'm not going to elaborate on that. Restitution, we've talked about that. And so you got to get paid money to be able to do restitution. Forfeiture. Oh, I can tell you many times that in crimes, what happens is that, like, for example, if you use a car and you commit a crime, that car can be seized and sold. I've seen situations where innocent individuals, for example, there was a young man I was representing one time, and he was charged with a crime, and he was selling drugs, and so they seized the car. Well, it turns out the car was his mom's car, but she didn't know he was doing it, so she got a lawyer and went in and proved she had no knowledge of what was going on, and they gave the car back. But if they discover that it's your vehicle, or that the person is involved with you or had knowledge of the things that you were doing, then in that case, the vehicle is taken away. There's a program called DARE, and the DARE program in most jurisdictions, they have sometimes what they call DARE cars. Or you've seen these police cars. Man, these police officers are driving around in Corvettes and all kind of fancy cars. Well, that's because these vehicles were forfeited in criminal cases, oftentimes in drug deals, and they become police cars, unmarked police cars at that. Then, of course, the final one is paying a fine to the court or to the state in situations like that. So, these are different sanctions and what and how they might benefit an individual dealing in probation. Diversion programs are at both juvenile and adult levels, and the other point is, it means just what it says, the diversion. That means to point them in another direction from criminal involvement. Um, to avoid the stigma of criminal conviction record, once thought of as a big break to offenders, is now used more and more as a pretrial intervention. Offenders who participate in diversion programs do so before trial. They are not subject to jail time, but they may be released out, like on an I-bond, may be required to pay program fees to participate as well. So there's a number of ranges of alternative and diversion programs, fines, fees, restitution, community service, some of the same things we talked about earlier, treatment programs, education programs, abstaining from use of drugs, random testing, and so forth and so on. And if the individual fails to comply with the requirements, the case can be filed with the court and legal proceedings resulting in consequences begin. So the point of the matter is that there's no criminal case going, but that if you fail to satisfy the diversion program, then there is a case and you could possibly be incarcerated. Agencies have policies regarding who and what types of offenses fit this pretrial. Most violent offenders are not eligible for diversion for obvious reasons. So although it says not considered a crime of violence, driving while intoxicated is also an offense that is not typically eligible for diversion. And the reason for that is because we don't want to slap people on the wrist, or we don't want to give them a break in those situations because they've endangered themselves and oftentimes been involved with the possible deaths of others. And so this one right here, I'm going to play it just to see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen, but you get a chance to, if it doesn't come out very clear, go back and listen to this. Under the Community Corrections Act, agencies receive funding to provide probation services. And so let's see what the CCA director here says. Let's attempt to see if not. If not, you can look at this yourself, not in the recording, but go into the module. So let's see what comes up here. Okay, that was a very good video. Were you able to listen to it? Did it come through clear, Bailey? Did it come through clear? Oh, okay. All right. Um, so anyway, you can either look at it, but you notice that some of the things that she talked about confirms what I talked about. One of the things that she said is that a minimum of a 4-year degree in human services um, or either in criminal justice, but you must have a bachelor's degree in order to operate as a probation officer. She also stated that the probation officer is not like at a desk, but is out in the field. And she also talked about intermediate sanctions. And the purpose for intermediate sanctions is to make sure that individuals are help them to respond to a new direction faster than going through the process after a conviction where they've actually had a full trial and all of that. But the bottom line is that intermediate sanctions also give that individual a chance to turn it around rather than go to prisons or jails. And you should know that one of the things that happens oftentimes when individuals do get incarcerated is that they learn more about crime than they did before they were incarcerated as well. So it benefits society. There are people who say that, people go to prison and then they end up going to college. I had to pay to go to college and those kind of things. They said, you don't want to encourage people to go to prison to go to college. I said that's a ridiculous remark. No one that I know or have run across in all my years, and I started practicing in 1978, primarily in criminal law, criminal defense law, did I ever see a person say, "Oh yeah, I think I'll commit this crime so I can get a high school diploma or complete a program to get my GED or either get a college degree." I have never run across that, so that's a ridiculous thing. But the bottom line is intermediate sanctions are there, and they benefit in the long run society as we go forward. So I am going to go back into the classroom. Could you, do you have any questions now at this point? Any questions? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to do some grading tonight a little bit. And again, thank you guys for being patient while I go through this period dealing with the loss of a family member. And we'll be back up to speed by next week. But one of the things I always tell students is that I still try to answer your emails. I still try to do some work, but not at 100%. And I have the same respect for my students when they run into situations like this, because of the fact that we have to be empathetic to each other as people first, and to recognize that life happens with us, and that we're going to have situations like what we're dealing with, as some students have. And then you have some health issues that sometimes crop up. Just keep me posted and let me know, just like I let you know, and we'll work this thing out together, and all will be well at the end. So again, it's about 9:19. We got about maybe 10 minutes, 11 minutes, but I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to say good night to you and to everyone who has a chance to listen to this recording. And hopefully I will see you guys next Wednesday at 8:30 Central Standard Time when we will be discussing the assignments and everything for week 4, which is actually the next assignment for the project. So making sure. The one last thing I do want to say before I go, thank you, is that I've had a few students to say to me, hey, you know, I don't know, I'm having trouble reaching people. I told you guys, and I usually tell all of my students in this course, that the reason I spend the first week going over detail with the introduction, not just say, hey, read the module, but to present to you some basic ideas and to get you started, is so that you will get started right away. Don't wait until the week that an assignment is due. Knowing that what you got to do, move ahead, prepare, do and take your time and do a good job. Check with the rubrics. The rubrics are right there for you to make sure it says, oh yeah, I missed this particular point. I got to add this before I submit my assignment. And for goodness sake, please try to keep up with each of those weeks and get those assignments in on time, because you will lose points if you don't get them in on time. And the key is to make sure that you maximize your points in the open house. So you guys have a good rest of the week, and I'm going to end the meeting. I'll see you next week.